Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to hold an international fauna webinar with our special speaker, Dr. Ying-chi, B.Sc, M.Sc, Ph.D. Before we continue, let me explain some of the rules regarding our webinar today. First, rename the participant name with the format name underscore state underscore agency. Example, Clarisha underscore University of Bangka Belitung underscore Indonesia. Second, use the official template from the committee. Third, the participants have to turn on the camera during the event. Fourth, the most active participant orderly manner.
Oh, kabelan ya gitu.
Before we continue, let me explain some of the rules regarding our webinar today. First, rename the participant name with the format name underscore state underscore agency. Example, Clarissa underscore University of Bangka Belitung underscore Indonesian. Second, use the official template from the committee. Third, the participants have to turn on the camera during the event. Fourth, the most active participant will get the merchandise. Fifth, the participants have to be here on time, turn off the mic when not speaking, use polite language, and follow the event in an orderly manner. Next, before I turn it over to our moderator, let me read the moderator CVs and speech them. So, Dr. Ying-chi Chan is an ecologist with specific interest in animal movement and conservation. After earning a bachelor's degree in environmental life science from the University of Hong Kong, she continued her studies in Europe and obtained a Master's of Science degree in Ecology and Evolution from the University of Groningen in the Netherlands. During her master's, she developed a strong fascination towards the long-distance migratory shorebirds and the study of their ecology, and was deeply concerned by the sharp declines in the shorebird population in her home flyway. The East Asian Australasian flyway. This motivated her to pursue a Ph.D. on movement ecology of threatened shorebirds in the EAF. After receiving her Ph.D. degree from the University of Groningen in 2021, she worked as a postdoctoral researcher at the Swiss Ornithological Institute in Switzerland, studying migration and dispersal of raptors. She recently started as an assistant professor at Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. Her research focuses on movement ecology of animals in Southeast Asia and how animal movement research can fill knowledge gaps important for wildlife conservation and management. So the speech them is, in the seminar, she will share about her work on how coastal degradation in East Asia impacts shorebirds populations and how studying their movement patterns fill key knowledge gaps on these threatened shorebirds populations. So before I turn it over to moderator, let me read the moderator CVs first. Mrs. Nur Anis Hidayati, M.Sc. Ph.D. candidate, is one of the lecturers of Biology Study Program in University of Bangka Belitung. She is a Ph.D. candidate of University of Delaware. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to begin our main event today. So let me turn it over to our moderator. Please welcome Mrs. Nur Anis Hidayati, M.Sc.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nurani Hidayati, a faculty member at Biology Department, University Bangka Belitung. Thank you for the committee from Biology Student Association at University Bangka Belitung. Has joined us today Dr. Chan, Ying-chi Chan, or Dr. Ginny Chan from NTU Singapore as the speaker of our very first presentation in 2025 webinar series organized by Biology Student Association of University Bangka Belitung. As a short introduction, Dr. Chan is an ecologist with specific interest in animal movement and conservation. And after earning a bachelor degree in environmental life science from the University of Hong Kong, she continued her study in Europe with the prestigious Erasmus Mundus scholarship and obtained a master's science degree in ecology and evolution, cum laude from University of Groningen in Netherlands. We met at RUG at 2010 to 2012 in Netherlands, and during her master, she developed a strong fascination toward long-distance migratory shorebirds and studied their ecology and was deeply concerned by the sharp declines of the shorebird population in her home flyway in East Asian Australasian flyway. And this motivated her to pursue a Ph.D. Also in RUG, University in Groningen in 2021. After that, she worked as a postdoc researcher at the prestigious Swiss Ornithological Institute in Switzerland, studying migration and dispersal of raptor. And she recently started as an assistant professor at Nanyang Technological University, or NTU Singapore. Her research focuses on movement ecology of animals in Southeast Asia and how animals movement research can fill knowledge gap important for wildlife conservation and management. And today, in our very first presentation in our webinar series, she will share about her work on how coastal degradation in East Asia impacts shorebird population and how studying their movement pattern fill the knowledge gaps on this threatened shorebird population. Without further ado, Dr. Ginny, thanks for joining us, and I think the time is yours.
Hello, Anis. Thanks for your nice introduction. Hi, everyone. Yeah, thanks for coming. I will share my screen now. I hope you see my PowerPoint, right? Yeah. So yeah. So hello again, everyone. I'm very happy to be invited to this webinar today. So today my talk will be about migration of threatened shorebirds in the East Asian Australasian flyway. And I'm from the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. I recently started as a new assistant professor. So maybe first we talk a little bit about what is migration. So migration is of course not just birds, but like it's happening in all sorts of animals, like also insects like butterflies, crabs, mammals, fish, etc. But in birds, they are doing like, because they can fly, they're doing one of the longest migrations we know in the world. So we can distinguish different types of migration based on the distance. So there are long distance one and shorter distance one, like for example within continents, and even shorter distance, like maybe like partial migration. So only some individuals in the population migrate and some not. So one good example of a very, very long distance migration is the bar-tailed godwit. So it is a shorebird. So this is one of the first documented individual migration of this type of birds. And these birds, they winter in New Zealand, which is the non-breeding site, and then they fly straight all the way to moment. There's someone asked me to join some room. I hope everyone can see my screen again. Yeah, should be okay. Yeah. Okay. So these bartogowit, they migrate from New Zealand all the way to China in one straight flight, where they stop during the migration, and then they go breed in Alaska, fly another 6,500 kilometers. And then they actually, from the tracking of the birds, they know that they actually fly straight back to New Zealand. That's more than 11,000 kilometers. So this is one example. This was one example of a migration of birds, and based on like known ideas of migration of many different types of birds, we divided the whole world into different flyways, we call it. So here are the main flyways in the world, and I think you will know where you are. So not sure if you see my cursor, but anyway, we are around here. So we belong mainly to the East Asian Australasian Flyway. So the East Asian Australasian Flyway is one of the biggest flyway in the world. And there are at least 52 species of migratory shorebirds using this flyway. So these are some of the species. So if you're familiar with shorebirds, I'm sure you will recognize them. I will talk about some of them in the talk. So one of the major stopover or staging area where these birds stop and fill up during the migration is the Yellow Sea area in the coast of China and Korea. So, but the Yellow Sea is having a lot of problems for shorebirds. So this is just one example of birds that are threatened. So for example, the great knot is an endangered species now, and there are also like other critically endangered species like the Norman's greenshank and the spoon-billed sandpiper. So why is the Yellow Sea so important? That's one reason is that because, so this is a picture actually I took the first time I've been there during migration season. So one reason is that there are many very high density of food for the shorebirds. So they can have a lot of food like this small shellfish. Like this is a picture that is bigger than how it should relative to the bird, of course. But these are really tiny shellfish that gives a lot of food for the shorebirds to fatten up during their migration. But the Yellow Sea is also under a lot of threats to shorebirds because of development of the coastline. So one major threat is land reclamation. So here, the mudflats where these birds are feeding are transformed into land for example, factories or for agriculture, etc. So the mud is pumped, and you can see this machine here. The mud is pumped into like this area where they build a sort of a dike, and then they pump the mud in and make it into land. So you can imagine the amount of mud flats available for shorebirds is reducing. So this is actually a study using satellite imagery to look at how changes of mudflat area in the Yellow Sea over more than 50 years. So they found that from 1950s to the 2000s, there are like 65% of tidal flats is destroyed. So that's a huge reduction of available habitat. And that definitely has consequence on the ecosystem. So this is one of the major reclamation projects happened in South Korea. So when they kind of finished the project, they closed this seawall, so this mudflat is dead, so there's no exchange of water anymore. And then afterwards, you can see all these shellfish, they are actually dead. So they just kind of opens up and like that, like all over the mudflat. So you can imagine these are also like food for the birds. So that has a huge impact on shorebirds. And there are other threats to shorebirds also in the coastline. So for example, harvesting of shellfish by people. So there's also reduce the food and disturb the birds if it's too intensively done. And there's also invasive species like this, the top right, this Spartina codgrass, that is reducing the area of tidal flats. And then in the bottom left, we have also like, for example, wind energy, turbines, fishing nets, etc. And some of these nets, if it's not done well, they could catch shorebirds, and the shorebirds will drown in there when there is high tide. So we know there's a lot of different habitat destruction and like different human activities that could affect shorebirds. So scientifically, what is the effects that we know of? So at the population level, we can look at counts of shorebirds. And this is a study done by a group in Australia. So they look at the counts in Australia, where the majority of these shorebird populations stay during the non-breeding season. And they found that the trend over 20 years, many of them are negative. So here 0 is like no change, and you see most species, the dot is below the 0, so it's in the negative. And they also calculate how this is related to the reliance on the Yellow Sea, so how much they use the Yellow Sea during the migration. So yeah, so it seems that species that rely more on the Yellow Sea has some stronger negative population trend. So this kind of link between there are many threats to shorebirds in the Yellow Sea to some population decline. So this is a bit of a further illustration by the species, the great knot. So first it was least concern actually in the 80s by the IUCN Red List. But after this closure of seawall in South Korea in Samangam, so that was where I talked about before. So that's here in the red circle. So yeah, in the second picture, you can see like the dike they built. So then the inside of this dike is, they want to transform it to land. So all this mudflat is destroyed in this process. So this was the main area for 20 to 25% of Great North population. So what happened is that after they lost this 400 kilometer square of tidal flats, they record a decrease in survival in Great North, and the population declined for about 90,000 birds. So then Great North was uplisted in the IUCN Red List to vulnerable. But then in the early 2010s, there was also reclamation in main staging site in China. And a study done by the research group I was in also showed the annual survival decline. So based on this type of information, the Great North was uplisted to endangered in 2015. So you may ask, like, how do we know about this annual survival? How do we actually study it? So here I will explain to you a bit more. So this is actually a study done by using color banding and reciting methods. So here you see a group of shorebirds, and these two birds have some interesting rings on their legs. So these are coloring that has unique combination for every individual. So for example, the left-hand one is red, yellow, green color. Like the flag doesn't count because all the birds tagged in the same location has the same yellow flag. And the other one is green, red, green, something. No, green, red, yellow, green. So they all have a different combination. So we know that, okay, if we see this combination is this individual again. So this is done in 3 species, the Great North, Red North, and bar-tailed godwits in a major non-breeding site in Australia. So they gather a lot of data of whether I see this bird again or not. So you can imagine if I put the rings on this bird and I never see this individual again, this probably means that it has died. So then it will give us information about that, oh, the survival chance is quite low. So that's how we use this data to calculate survival. So in the data set, they actually divide the year into 3 periods. So this is a circle that shows different months of the year. And you divide it into 3 periods. And we calculate this survival per period. So the first is when the time they spend in Australia. So these are these 2 periods. So actually from about September to April, May. And then there's another period where they spent in migration. So that's about May to August. They actually went up to Yellow Sea and go to breed in other and come back. So what we found for every single species is that, so this is survival for the first season, like when they're in Australia. So, okay, it's still quite high. It's about 0.9% in Australia. And also the second season in Australia, so like the second part of the non-breeding season, that's also quite high. But the third part, when they are in migration, that's the part in red. So you can see all the 3 species, they show like quite a low survival, especially in 2011 and 2012. So that's also when a lot of reclamation has happening. So from this result, we understand that land reclamation could really be linked to low survival in this these shorebird species. Of course, these are also just some sort of correlation, right, with the population trend and also survival. And a lot of people argue that, okay, so you have land reclamation in one place, but the birds can fly, so can't they just fly somewhere else? So that's also motivated us at that time to do a satellite tracking study. So really to look at movements of individual birds to understand what's going on. So this is actually the topic of my PhD thesis when I was in the University of Groningen. And so focus on migration ecology of a few species of shorebirds. So this is done also in collaboration with USGS in US and Delft and Global Fire Network. And these are the main topics in my thesis. So I will not tell you everything, but just some highlights from it. So of course, it's not just I do everything. So there was many people that contributed to the studies and funded by also different agencies. So the main method we use is to track birds with these satellite trackers that we put on the back of the bird. So we put them in Northwest Australia, where many of these birds spend the winter. And this is like, we put them on bartail godwit and the great knot. So these two species are both threatened in the flyway. So our results, after a few years of tagging, we gather like good number of tracks. And these are just very simple plots of the tracks. And for great knot, this is the first tracking study done for this species. And for bartail godwit, this is more or less the second. So from great knots, we try to identify coastal sites of conservation importance. Somebody's drawing on the slide, but yeah. So, but anyway, why do we use? Actually, why do we study great knots other than that it's endangered? Because we think that is particularly good as an indicator species for this purpose. So it's fully dependent on intertidal habitat for foraging, and it's distributed widely across this flyway. And back then it could carry the lightest satellite trackers available. So in 2015 to 17, we tracked 32 great knots, and then we found actually they stopped during their migration in 92 places. So these birds, from Northwest Australia, they go to breed here in the Russian Arctic, in the north, and these are the tracks, and from the tracks we can extract where they stop. So from these 92 sites, we measure how much knowledge we gained. So how many sites are discovered from tracking versus sites that were known before the tracking is done. So first we looked at known sites for great knots. So these are places that were known to be important for great knots based on counting. So actually only 70% of the 92 sites were known for great knots. And if we expand it to known sites for migratory shorebirds, actually only 37% of the 92 sites were previously known important sites for shorebirds. And the rest are actually unknown to science. So most of the sites we found are not really recorded as important sites for shorebirds. So we've also plotted by region. So Russia, Yellow Sea region, southern China's coast, and Southeast Asia. And you can see that, so for example, for Yellow Sea, there are like quite a high percentage of places that actually we know, okay, this is actually important for shoppers. So the unknown places are not as many. But guess how many are for Southeast Asia? So actually you can see it from this map. So all of the places we found in Southeast Asia were not known important places for shoppers back during the study. It's a bit different now, of course, because this was done like 8 to 9 years ago. Yeah. So what we also did using our data is to survey the sites, because so many places are not counted or not really established, right? So we want to figure out what's going on there. So because back then we focus on China, Chinese coast. So we actually went to a lot of places marked by these squares and triangles. So that was done with my collaborator, Dr. Herbal Peng, actually from the same laboratory. So we covered about 18 sites since spring 15 to 2018. But actually, Herbal, he continued doing these surveys for his PhD study, and by 2024, he already covered 40 sites every year. So that's a big achievement to increase the knowledge about coastal shopper sites in the Chinese coastline. So what we did is that we look at where the shoppers are stopping, and then we go there and we do surveys of bird counts, and we did sampling of benthic organisms to know what food are available for the birds. And we observed behavior of birds, like foraging behavior, what they're eating, and what are the special threats to that site. To give you an example, I will zoom into one place that we found after our work that is actually very important. So that's Lianyungang in the Yellow Sea. That's here. So this site, before our study, okay, we know a bit like it's an important site, but the information is not so updated in the literature. So we went there during our survey, and we also conducted other complementary analysis to establish the importance of this place. So first, we looked at satellite imagery analysis and found that 27% of soft sediment habitat has been destroyed during 2023 to 2018 by reclamation. And then so based on the counts done by the volunteer there and by us, we found that there are 43 species using this place, including 12 globally threatened species, and 22 species, the count exceed 1% of the EAF population. So that's usually the criteria of whether this site is important for a species of shorebird. So it actually ranked highest among like this 22 species, this number of species with over 1%, that is highest among the many shorebird sites in Asia. So this place is actually very important for shorebirds. And from the benthic survey, we also found a very, very high density of one main prey item for shorebirds. This Potamocubula laphus is a type of shellfish that could be very small and has a thin shell, so it's easy for the birds to digest. And from the satellite trackings, the tracks, we also understand the movement, so we know how long they're staying there, and we can map the high tide routes and low tide foraging areas. So this is some of these places we can go there and look at the birds, but some actually not because they're inaccessible. So this actually gives us extra information of how the birds use this area. And another example I want to give you on how we use this information from tracking is on another site at Tongzhou Bay. So this is done in, so Tongzhou Bay is here. This is done actually with a student from TU Delft, Jos Müller. So he is actually engineering student. But from our study, what we did is that, so his project was about how do you build a port, but also use tracking data to understand the ecological impact. So based on our tracks of where the birds use the area, and based on his hydrodynamic model, can calculate that actually the building of the port that is this area will result in a 45% loss of habitat for shorebirds. And another way that he tried to do with his study is that how different port designs will help in creating or preserving habitats for shorebirds. So he tried to evaluate port designs based on 3 objectives. So first you have to create area for the ports, but at the same time preserve existing high-value habitat for shorebirds and enhance the natural aggregation rates of these habitats. So first, he made a sediment transfer port model, and then he looked at habitat requirements of shorebirds according to the tracking data we gathered. And then he compared that with different possible port designs. So then he calculated how habitat suitable for shorebirds will grow or shrink in the next 20 years based on all this information to sort of give alternatives to how different port designs will affect the habitat of shorebirds. So this is somehow an example of how this data can also be used in designing development that try to reduce the impact on shorebirds. So lastly, I'll talk more about the bird itself, how we try to use movement of data to understand how birds are actually coping with habitat loss and deterioration. So yeah, so I talked about before, okay, so one place is destroyed by land development, but the birds can fly, like can't they just go to another place? But there is actually energy and time cost involved in flying to another place. So you imagine the bird fly all the way from Australia and they come to this place where they stop, and then they found, oh, the habitat is not there anymore. So they have to actually spend some time to maybe look for another site, or or maybe even if they know there is another site, they have to fly there, right? And there's also risk, what if the other site is also destroyed? So this touch onto the concept of site fidelity. So how faithful is the bird to the place? So are they, when they do their migration, do they stop in the same place every year? Or do they actually go to different places. If they go to different places, maybe then they're not as so affected by like one place is destroyed and then maybe they just didn't happen to go to that place. But if they just based on their but just go to the same place every year because they know the place is good, right? So then if they do that, so if the place is destroyed, that might affect them quite severely. So we did it with the two species. We put the trackers on the great knot and the bar-tailed godwit. So with the movement data from satellite tracking and the reciting of lake bands to expand our data set. That's because we only track like maybe about 20 birds for each species. So the data is rather limited, but the reciting of lake bands, so to tell the individuals, like if this individual is sighted here and in site 2, then we also know they sort of use both sides and might be moving in between. So this is just what we know before. This is a background information from the paper I talked about earlier. The rates of population declines, so both species are in the negative. The bar-tailed is slightly higher, more negative. And the great knots, they are actually eating bivalves, so they are bivalve specialists. They are mainly eating bivalve, and the bar-tailed eating polychaetes like worms. So, and then this is the prey density at one site, very important for this species, the Yalujiang Nature Reserve in China. So you can see that the amount of prey for both species, total amount of prey for shorebirds decline a lot, but especially bivalve has declined a lot. So think, okay, this should affect the great knot more because they are specialized on bivalves. Oh, yeah, but we actually did not see that the great knot has a much lower survival, much lower population decline, much higher rates of population decline than the godwits, right? So why is that? So that's what we try to figure out from the site fidelity. I think I missed a slide. Oh, sorry. So yeah, I think I just have one slide that is missing, but I can just explain to you like this. So what we found in our study, what we find here from these two different types of data is that the bar-tailed godwit has a much higher site fidelity than the great knot. So which means that they always, so both in Northwest Australia and in the Yellow Sea, they always go to the same site, like as an individual. So that that might explain it why. So from this site fidelity, we would expect that, okay, then they are more affected by like habitat destruction. Yeah, but at the end, the rate of population decline is similar, maybe because this bar-tailed godwit has a higher site fidelity, but it eats more different types of prey. So it might kind of compensate the effects of it. Whereas the great knot, it goes to more places, but it's more specialized eating the bivalve prey. So to sort of make overall a broader understanding of of habitat loss and deterioration in shorebirds. We can see that maybe in the past, that's how most birds in Australia migrate. They can fly straight to the Yellow Sea and then they stop there, rest and fuel up for a month, and then they will fly to the Arctic to breed. But since now the staging area, the stopover areas are not as good as in the old days. So maybe they are relying more on staging areas other than the Yellow Sea. So for example, these sites we found in Southeast Asia and also the South Chinese coast. So we are also wondering, are they like so also important in the past, just that we didn't have any, like we didn't survey enough, or is that getting more and more important now? But these other places also have threats to shorebirds. So for example, illegal trapping. So another way that birds could cope maybe is to just not fly all the way to Australia, but to spend their non-wintering, non-breeding season at areas closer to the breeding grounds. That is the coastline in different parts of Southeast Asia. So, or maybe they can also skip migration in some years. So we call this phenomenon over summer. So maybe they do that, so they don't go every year, and that might help with their survival, because the migration is so difficult these days. So these are all these still knowledge gaps that we don't quite know about now, and that is for future research. So this is sort of what I want to share about migration ecology of threatened shorebirds in East Asia. And I will end with a bit of a bigger picture of about movement ecology itself as a field. So you hear a lot already from me about tracking of birds and how this data is used in different types of studies. And actually, movement ecology is a growing field. So movement ecology, that's because movement is really fundamental to animals. So, and it's a way like to study animal movement has been evolving technologies since back then. So before, people were used to put rings on the legs of the birds to track, okay, this bird was seen here and there, and then, okay, it moved actually between these two places. But then there are different technologies used, and from 1990s, there's GPS technology involved, and then the text actually becomes smaller and smaller, so we can apply it to like smaller and smaller animals. So this is an animation of how many tracks are there, like that is in one of the major database called MoveBank. So these are all the studies done by many different people in the world on different types of animals. Yeah, so you can see there are actually many individual animals that was carrying these small trackers and being tracked everywhere. Yeah, so this animation actually goes for a while. It will turn around the whole globe. So yeah, if you have time, you can go to the website to watch it. So this type of tracking data, they actually gives us different types of data in different spatial scales. So there's short to long-term temporal scale and fine to large spatial scale. So the small scale is like day-to-day movement. And then we can look at foraging. And from the larger scale, there's like migration. Yeah, so, okay. And now, yeah, just like what I talked before, there are many studies done. So this is just study that was uploaded to MoveBank, but there are also other databases, so there are actually more. So there are new papers on like how we could actually use this type of data to increase our understanding on ecology of animal movement. So there are also many more R packages developed for this. So what we did with some collaborators is to analyze all papers in the journal Movement Ecology. But we found that there's, so where data was actually collected, we found that there's actually only 6% were from Asia. So you can see, so this is just, the bottom graph is just an expansion of what this 6% is about. So you can see there is just not many studies published on the Movement Ecology journal that is on studies from Asia. So this journal is like a specialized journal on this topic, right? So as also reflected in the first author, first affiliation, so not many authors are from Asia. So you can, well, it's kind of expected, of course, but it's sort of a quantification of this huge geographical bias in this field. So what, so I just started in Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, and what I think is very important is to study movement ecology in Southeast Asia, where there's a lot of biodiversity loss, but there's also somehow a lack of baseline ecological data. And one of our aim is to inform wildlife conservation and management, and another also to advance the field of movement ecology in the region, so that so as to help fill this gap that I talked about just earlier. So in terms of local movements, there are actually a lot of new technology suitable for tracking small animals now. So what I talked before is like almost technology from 10 years ago. So there are actually smaller tags now, and also the cost is getting much cheaper. So I think one of the major barrier is that because these tags are expensive, of course. So that's maybe the main reason that it's not really much done in Asia. But nowadays, there are actually more and more manufacturers and much smaller tags, and that are also of like maybe much cheaper. And then we could use this information to inform wildlife conservation and management. And for long distance migration, actually a lot of birds, the majority of time is spent in the tropic. So this is a study done in Americas, but they analyze just how much time each species, the time is spent in the tropical non-breeding area versus the other time it was migrating and breeding. So the blue is the non-migratory season. So it's actually the majority of the time in almost most of the species they study. So they every year they spend a lot of time in the tropics, and the young birds actually spend there like even like before they start to breed. They usually young birds don't breed immediately for bigger species, so they actually spend a few years in non-breeding area. So I think it's very important to understand movements of birds in this period when they're in the tropical non-breeding area. So to end, so if you are interested in movement of animals and in spatial ecology and in wildlife monitoring methods and analysis. So these are the main themes for our lab. So I also invite you to contact me if you're interested. You can think about joining us. So we are recruiting master, PhD, postdocs. So just you can find me by contact me by email. And yeah, this is the end of my talk. Thanks a lot for your attention. Thanks. If you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Oh, thanks, Dr. Chan. We are very fortunate to have a top global scientist here. So I think we should give her a virtual applause as very interesting long-term studies. Knowing the importance of the study, we found out how species could change from the status least concerned to threatened. Thanks for sharing, Dr. Chan. As we see that Dr. Chan and her collaborators use several methods and devices to follow and study the movement of migratory shorebird. And as you might know, there's also a big development here in Indonesia, in the island of Borneo, the island that passed through by the line that you drew just recently. While here in Bangka Island, we don't see migratory shorebird as frequent and as massive in Yellow Sea. But in terms of destruction, here we have issues with illegal tin mining activities along the shorelines that could also lead to the habitat deterioration. And thanks for the insight for our young scientists. I think if you have any question, feel free to ask. You can jump into Zoom and unmute yourself or put it in chat. I can read it for the Chan. Oh, there's one question, Dr. Chan.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
I wanna ask some question, but before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Parisata Kumadeka, and I want to apologize if my question is a little bit outside the topic of the migration. I wanna ask about the installing a tracker on the grid node. I wanna know, by installing a tracker, does it not hurt the animal, or does it not affect the animal's health? Because as far as I know, installing a tracker will cause excessive exposure to electromagnetic fields, which can affect the animal's health. Like it can cause some distortion to animal reproduction and can cause animal stress. And also help madam know, don't any solution to the side effect of installing the tracker. If yes, I would like to know what solution madam led to do. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your question. I think you asked about if the tracker will affect the birds because of the electromagnetic, some sort of, yeah. So I don't think there's actual evidence for that now. So you can imagine it's a bit like us, we have a phone or some. So nowadays we are carrying our phone around almost 24/7, and there is not actual real like scientific evidence that it is detrimental to our health, right? So the trackers are very small, so it's something a bit like that, I would think, as to a bird. Yeah, but there are actually many studies that looked at the effects of carrying the tracker. So not exactly the how to say? So not exactly the like the functionality of the tracker that affects the bird, but like the thing itself. So if you carry extra weight, does this affect the bird, right? Because the bird has to fly. So if the tracker is too heavy, of course it will have an effect on the bird. So we actually have this idea of try to minimize the weight to less than 3% of the body weight. And that's also studied in different studies. So they compare, let's say there's a control group of birds without tracker and one with tracker and see if their survival rates differ. And some study also looked at reproduction. So there are actually some study found that there's an effect. So then they will advise not to put the tracker on those species. So for example, some seabirds, they need to dive. So if there is a thing on the back, you can imagine they just don't swim so well, right? Like so then it's not recommended to put a tracker on those type of species. But for the species we studied, I think we didn't really find like a significant negative effect. Yeah.
I think it's clear enough for this, and I think we should give time for Dina Famuri. You raise your hand, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Right. I hope. Am I
I think it's
audible?
enough, ma'am. I think it's enough. Yeah. This.
All right. So, okay. First of all, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to asking the question. Maybe the first question. I literally have two questions for two slides that you've been shared before. The first thing that I want to ask about, you said that you used the device that call animal-borne tracking technologies, right? So the device are literally carried by the animals that collect or transmit data for you to do the research, right? So the question is going to be like, the first thing first is like, since this device is exactly are the animal-borne, and how you exactly ensuring that attaching tags does not negatively like impacting or like affecting animal natural behavior and also survival itself. And the second question is going to be like, how do you ensuring like the accuracy of satellite data, satellite tracking data in identifying high tide routes and low tide foraging area, especially when you mentioned that some sites are exactly inaccessible on the ground itself. So that's my question. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dina.
So,
Also, we have several questions on the chat box. Dr. Chan, I will read it later for you.
thanks. Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Dina. So I think the first question I sort of answered also to Faris. So yeah, so the birds are carrying these trackers. So of course we have to make sure the trackers are not affecting the behavior of the birds. Otherwise, the results are not, will not be representative, right? So there are studies that compare survival rates. And for our study, we also went to the sites to observe the birds. So that's what the surveys were about. So we also counted, so we actually see our birds that carry the trackers within the flock of birds. So we know, okay, they are with the other birds and they are behaving the same. Like they are not like one like isolated bird outside, so they are within the flock. So for our perspective, we also can understand that, okay, maybe the tracker is not really affecting the behavior because they behave the same as the other birds. Yeah. And the second question is sorry, I kind of forgot the second question. Anis, do you remember?
Sure.
Now,
So,
would you repeat your second question?
Yeah,
okay.
I didn't see you anymore, but yeah.
All right. Maybe the second question is like, about the satellite tracking data that you said in your slide. That is exactly like, it's map high
Yeah.
tide routes and low tide foraging area in which some are inaccessible on the ground, right? So the question is like, how do you exactly ensuring the accuracy of the satellite tracking data itself when you are mentioned that some sites are inaccessible on the ground?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So yeah, the places where we could not do observations is that we we can only understand that is a roost or foraging ground because the birds were there during high. If it's there during high tide, they're roosting basically. So we know, because we know what time is high tide, low tide, right? So we can deduce it from the data. So of course, some places we verify this by going there and take a look, but some places we just cannot assess. So we have to just deduce it based on the timing of whether it's during high tide or during low tide. Yeah.
Dr. Chan, and in the chat box, there's Dr. Edino Cahya, our senior faculty here, say, terima kasih banyak. Thank you very much, Dr. Chan. The way you prepare your excellent presentation may inspire UBB students, and thank you. And there's also a couple questions from Zamila. She asks, may I ask what role restored habitat from mining play in climate change adaptation strategies for bird conservation? And there are a couple others. Do you want me to read it all at once, or you just want to respond it one by one?
I can just respond one by one, so I don't forget
the question. Is, what role restored habitat in climate change adaptation strategies for bird conservation?
Yeah, I think I don't really know too much about this.
About the restored habitat, how it play the adaptation strategies for the shorebird in terms of from the perspective of bird conservation.
Yeah, I mean, like for restored, the habitats restored from mining,
yeah,
particularly.
Yeah, because we have a lot of mining activities here.
Yeah. So what sorts of habitat is restored? I'm not too familiar with that, but
yeah, some use reclamation and some use revegetation of the land, but certainly they make the land use change.
Yeah, so if it's restored, well, I would think that it should help conserving birds for sure, and there should I mean, the birds, if they find these new places, they could use this place again, and I think that would be supportive for bird populations. Yeah, and I think, yeah, this question we really need to study it properly. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's also one more sort of related question with the previous one from Melda. She asks, I think I just make it short. If tidal flat ecosystem are considered as critical habitat, how should mining and reclamation policies be formulated so as not to violate the international conservation principles?
And thanks for your question.
Yeah, she asked something related to how the reclamation policies and how the correlation with the international principles in conservation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think first it's important if the place itself is established as a critical habitat. I think this is one major issue in some places, that actually the place itself is not protected, right? Then the international conservation treaties, for example, a Ramsar site, if you have heard about, this is a treaty signed by many countries. So that's so if one site is designated as a Ramsar site, then it has to be protected according to this international standard. That means the country itself cannot just destroy the site at its will, because they have to report like back to the Ramsar the Ramsar Convention. So if your site is at that level, that would be really a very good achievement, because then you have also pressure from the international community to protect this place. So I think that's one thing. And so that's also one thing we try to achieve using science, because that's if we want to support, because these Ramsar sites, for example, it needs to have some criteria. You cannot just like, oh, I want this place to be Ramsar sites, and then you just make it happen, right? It has to support critical numbers of some species of birds, for example. So you have to satisfy these criteria, and that is through scientific studies and also surveys. Yeah, and if so, in the lower level, maybe this also, so internationally, you can also nominate a site as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So that's actually what happened in the Yellow Sea region. So before our study, I mean, the Yellow Sea was known to be an important area, the coastline. But during the course of our studies, the Chinese government actually wanted to nominate the Yellow Sea coast as a World Heritage Site. And actually, some of our tracking data was also used in this process. So now a few sites along the Yellow Sea coast is belong to World Heritage. So they actually has a very high protection status. So because the Chinese government can have to really protect them so as to keep this status, right? So I think this is an important part to really inform the policy in the country level. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Chan. I think the participants of our webinar is very exciting to know more about the shorebird conservation. There's actually a couple more questions in the chat box, but I don't think we have time for that. So if you don't mind, can they reach you by email for further question? Because of our time.
No problem. Yeah, just can email me. Yeah, thanks. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you very much, Dr. Chan. Thanks for sharing. And I think we should give her another virtual applauses for joining us. Thank you. And I think I will close our first webinar series here, and I will return the screen to the MC. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ying-chi Chan, B.Sc, M.Sc, Ph.D, and Mrs. Nuranis Hidayati, M.Sc, Ph.D candidate. Next, there will be a symbolic handover of certificate to our moderator, Mrs. Nuranis Hidayati, M.Sc, Ph.D candidate. Then, there will also be a handover of certificate to our speaker, Dr. Ying-chi Chan, B.Sc, M.Sc, Ph.D.
Thank you.
So these are the names of the most active participants who will receive souvenirs from University of Bangka Belitung and AMINEF. Please contact the committee via the contact details list on the Zoom chat room. The names are Okay, these are the names of the most active participants. They are Faris Atalah Kumadeka, Dina Famuri, Zamila Nuriza, Melda, Anggi Puspitawati, Weni Beliani, Selma, Betty Putri Askia, Syahwa Sakina, and Nira Erianti. Please contact the committee via the contact details listed on the Zoom chat room. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the real ending of the opening ceremony and international fund webinar of Biozen 11 2025. We hope Biozen 11 has given us knowledge, inspirations, and unforgettable experiences. See you at the next agenda of Biozen 11, post-mining land rehabilitation on 16th of September 2025. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you and have a wonderful day.